All right. Well, I'm pleased to welcome and introduce Soonalyn and Jinnyn Jacob. They are visiting from DC and from San Antonio, and they're going to tell us a little bit about San Antonio today. So I just want to take a moment to introduce them and tell you a little bit about their background, and then we'll hear a little bit about how they are building a strengths-based city in San Antonio. Soonalyn has a BA in economics and a master's in international business management. She began her professional life as an international market analyst for AT&T. She transitioned to real estate, where she and her husband founded the commercial real estate company Jacob Interests. After serving for 30 years on nonprofit boards, she became an ICF certified coach and co-founded Spiraling Up Solutions, a leadership development company that she founded with her daughter Jinnyn. She was an early adopter of Clifton Strengths as an essential tool in her coaching, training, and consulting. Using a unique combination of strengths, energy, leadership, and strategic planning, Spiraling Up Solutions has served several hundreds of clients from organizations ranging from large national and international nonprofits, corporate executives, and public servants from local government to the United Nations and to the U.S. Air Force. They have developed customized training programs for nonprofits and high-impact teams, from communities and schools to Vital Voices, Lift Fund, Masters Leadership Program, and the Harvard community. She's locally recently facilitated extensive training and strategic planning retreats for executive directors of the City of San Antonio, for Via Metropolitan Transit, and South Texas Regional 2040 Transportation Plans. I've got someone to talk to you about that. She's a founding board member of the San Antonio Children's Museum and served on board of directors for many nonprofits, which has led her to receive the Champion of the Year Award by the City of San Antonio for her volunteer efforts, and be voted as one of San Antonio's 100 most influential women. Jinnyn, so Soonalyn, mouthful. Jinnyn connects people and ideas in a way that activates positive change. She does this through her leadership development company, Spiraling Up Solutions, in partner with her mom, Soonalyn, and by investing in local innovation ecosystems across the U.S. as an innovation strategist for Booz Allen. Jinnyn is a startup mentor and has been honored as one of the new power women of DC Tech by DC Live and one of DC Inno's top 50 influencers for 2018. Previously, she created cultures of engagement for women as a Fulbright scholar in Turkey, championed the agenda of the world's female heads of state at the Council of Women World Leaders, co-created a social enterprise benefiting underserved female populations in Mexico, and built an academic department and political infrastructure in Qatar. Jinnyn has a BS from Georgetown and a master's in public policy from Harvard. So thank you both for joining us today. We're so grateful to have you here. It's been amazing getting to know you. I'd love for you to just take a moment, and I'm going to pass the mic to you, to tell us a little bit about what's happening in San Antonio and why that's becoming this spark of strength.
Oh. Well, thanks. Well, first of all, I'm going to just remind you about a study that you probably all are aware of, and it's the Harvard study on adult development. And it is the longest going study on happy, healthy, and long life. And that study polls leaders every year and asks what it is that makes their lives best, what makes them thrive. And every year, and by the way, they go very extensively on very many subjects, from your spirituality, your family, work life, all of those things. And I just want you to think about what consistently has always been the #1 highest rated value to them. What would that be? And every year, do we have an answer back there? No. That's a good one. But actually what comes up is your community. So if you think about what really brings you lasting happiness in your life, it is community. And sadly, you know, your loved ones may come and go, but it is your community that supports you. It's the people that you interact with every day when you pick up your cleaners that give you that feeling of belonging. So as we go into San Antonio and why it is important, it's really important as we go through this movement that we think locally in our own, locally being our own communities, before we go globally. So that's why we were asked, I think, to talk a little bit about what we're doing in San Antonio. And I'm going to pass it to Jinnyn.
I think I got a mic. So hello, everyone. First of all, I have to give a big shout out to the Leadership Rhode Island group. That's incredible that you guys are creating a strength-based state. And as we were, it was pretty funny because I kept looking at my mom and I was like, oh, they stole our presentation because so much of their playbook, and I think that's a real testament to the work that you're doing because a lot of your playbook is what we adopted in San Antonio as well. So let's talk a little bit about this city in which we have chosen to invest in, the city that we love. So San Antonio, Texas, it is the 7th largest city in the United States. We have a population of about 2 million people. This year we were arguably, statistics can change depending on the Google, but we are one of, if not the fastest growing city in the United States. Our demographics are interesting. We are the largest city in the United States where a minority is a majority. We are, I believe it's here, 63% Hispanic. We are looking aggressively to the future. So the San Antonio at one point was the fattest city in the United States, and now it is one of the top 5 cities for bike trails within the city. So very aggressive goals. So these Vision 2020 goals, but also with very deep roots into our past. So we were recently, the city was awarded World Heritage Site status for our missions, and you guys might heard of a little mission called the Alamo that we have. So when we take a look at this city, we're wedged between Dallas and Houston and Austin, and we don't have the same type of corporate backing in San Antonio, the large infrastructure that we do have in some of these other cities. But what we do have is really strong communities, and it was part of my input was coming through when Leadership Rhode Island was talking about their engagement studies. I had to Google what San Antonio's, and I actually didn't realize this, but San Antonio, the San Antonio New Braunfels metropolitan area, is the highest in engagement across the United States, with 38% engagement in 2014. 38% also, that's pretty sad that is the highest. And
Right.
so we're working on it.
Right. So it brings me back to the idea that, and by the way, we've always been intimidated by big Dallas and big Houston and awesome Austin that is just 90 miles up the street. So it's been kind of hard to be San Antonio. But just now we're recognizing, and thanks to the information through Gallup, is that, you can't be anything you want to be, but by God, you can be the best that you are. And that's what San Antonio has really been focusing on recently, is how can we be better at what we are? And we kind of leave it back to you.
Yeah. So the thing, as we've talked, that struck me, and again, we saw some of this in Rhode Island, was just the layers of community, business, nonprofit, schools, and organizations that have really come together through this kind of groundswell effect of strengths. If you were a city, someone here from another city, where would you begin?
That's a great question. So I'd love to say that we were Leadership Rhode Island and had this amazing strategic plan where we were going to go and took a top-down approach. That's not exactly how it worked. The way that we started, so we'll kind of tell you about what we did, and then we can tell you about what we would have done.
Awesome.
Differently. Had we known? Had we known? So what happened is that we identified needs and responded to those needs. So San Antonio, like all of your ecosystems, is an ecosystem, and it has different players. So we started with the nonprofit communities, social enterprises, small businesses, individual change makers, and we like to say that we ignited small fires across across San Antonio. We worked. One of our favorite engagements was with an organization called Communities in Schools.
How many of you are familiar with Communities in Schools? Oh, okay.
It is an awesome nonprofit. National nonprofit that has over a 90% success rate. When they take those students that are least likely to succeed, they have over 90% success rate once they touch that child. One of the interventions that we had with them is through the identification of strengths, we were able to identify why they were having such problem with funding when they were such an incredible nonprofit. And it was because they didn't have very few people that led with the persuasive domain. And so by focusing their attention on telling their story and having them be individual evangelists, we not only created evangelists for CIS, but also evangelists for strengths.
What that looks like on a citywide level is that we had a caseworker who might say, "What do you do for a living?" when asked, and he might or she might say, "I'm a caseworker for CIS," right? So after the strengths program, they would talk about, when asked that very same question, they would say, this is my favorite one, by the way, "I have the best job in the world. I get paid for loving kids and making sure that they're supported so that they can be successful in life." Pretty compelling, different story. How that looked also in CIS, and this brings it back to the city level, is that when you have entry-level positions in an organization, any organization, especially one like CIS, they were kind of a clearinghouse, that they would have high turnover because they couldn't pay very well, and that was just the nature of the business. And rather than being frustrated by that, they kind of owned up to it after going through strengths. And they said, by God, if we are going to be this place where we're going to have educators and social workers coming through, we want to train them so well that they are so appreciative of CIS that they can go back into the city, back into those higher paying jobs, but with a really, really strong background. So that's what it looks like in real life when you take a strengths approach and how that grows into community.
And back to the Leadership Rhode Island playbook, one of the things that we did is then CIS became our evangelists, and we started growing throughout the about the city. And I like to mention, like I said, these little fires. One of the ways that we were able to connect these fires into a larger fire is by connecting these nonprofits into an organization that Paul had mentioned earlier, which is Rackspace. So around the same time that we were doing this within the nonprofit community, the business community in San Antonio was starting to adopt strengths. So Rackspace, a local hosting company within San Antonio at the time, was, I believe, the company with the densest use of strengths outside of Gallup. And so we had a partner in Rackspace. We were able to actually take the nonprofits to Rackspace and learn from them and help to build public-private partnerships. Another great partner that we had is an organization called Masters Leadership Program. This is an exceptional organization that we have locally that you may wish to champion in your communities. What it does is it takes high-powered professionals. So these are individuals like generals and judges and CEOs. All of you guys here in the audience. What it does is it partners them, it gives them an education in the city and the needs of the city, and then pairs them with nonprofits.
After a year-long training program, so they're very, very fluent with San Antonio before they go into their roles on a speed dating basis in a nonprofit. It's called Masters Leadership Program. And we would love to share that program with your communities. It's amazing.
We're happy to share what that program looks like and how you might be able to build something like that for your communities. One of the things that we were able to do with this organization is to make them fluent in strengths. So now you have these bridges between the public and, between actually the public sector as well, because we're making connections with the city, with businesses, and with local nonprofits, and they were able to be strengths multipliers within their organizations as well as within the nonprofits that they were then working, which led us to one of a coup for us, which was to actually be able to influence the city of San Antonio.
So quickly tell us a little bit about how you penetrated the city executive directors and what that effort looks like. And then we've got time for maybe one question. So.
I just have to credit Jinnyn, my partner here, because what she's been able to open in one door outside of the city has really influenced by what we could do inside the city. So maybe you would just want to talk a little bit about that before I go back to the
So
city.
one of the ways, so you might ask, how do you then penetrate within the city infrastructure in order to really make it a strengths-based city? There are a couple of different ways. So one was we started from the ground up with all of these little fires that we had. The second is that we found champions within the organization, and we offered free mentoring and coaching so that we were able to sort of get a wedge in because we really cared about this mission of bringing strengths. The third was nothing is more attractive than success of others, right? Success feeds success. So through Washington, D.C., we were able to give examples of what we were doing in the D.C. area, and in particular, an international nonprofit that was started by Hillary Clinton and Madeleine Albright, Vital Voices.
How many of you are familiar with Vital Voices? Oh, yeah, Denise is.
Awesome. So we were able then to take the successes that we had done through Vital Voices and influence top change makers in the city so that we could make the city manager and the mayor and those top executives see themselves as the heroes of their own stories through strengths.
Right. How many of you are familiar with Women of the World, Tina Brown? Okay. Anyway, these very influential people helped us become credible. And that's what I think Brad was talking about, is that, at first, it's not just about personality identification. It's really where that leads you. And so with the city of San Antonio, we had a very, very contentious mayoral race leaving the city. And this is, I'm sorry to mention this, but it was before the really contentious presidential situation. So our city was in turmoil because of a contentious mayoral race before that left them very uncomfortable. And the city of the 2,000 employees under the directorship of the 100 executive directors of all the divisions of this very huge city that we have, very unsettled. And the wise city manager realized that and devoted a 3-day retreat to giving oxygen to our city employees that very much needed that. So we were able, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I think that's one of the lessons for us when introducing strengths and selling strengths is that people aren't buying strengths. They don't want to go and they're like, oh, that assessment looks great, I want that. No, they have problems, and one of the tools in which we can employ to solve those problems is the Strengths Finder assessment and the strengths movement. So one of the things that we did is we worked with them for 6 weeks to really understand their issues and build a program with them so that strengths weren't siloed. It wasn't like, here's your 3 hours for strengths. It was, we're going to indoctrinate you into strengths, and then we're going to tie those into your other objectives. So one of the things that was really important for the city was diversity, but more than diversity, inclusion, right? And so we use strengths as a way to start that narrative and then to talk about, well, what does it look like with millennial engagement, right? Like, how do we engage our diverse staff? Another one was innovation, right? How do we make sure we're not being stagnant? How do we get those great ideas from the bottom and the middle and bring those up to the top? And one of the ways that we were able to integrate strengths with that was we asked individuals to do a pitch competition on their ideas and put them in groups that were across the different organizations so that you couldn't just be with your transportation or your sanitation group. You had cross-sector teams. And then what we did is we had them present their ideas and pitch. And then from there, we walked around and said, okay, well, who do you need in order to build this idea and to turn this idea into life? And what we saw is that people were going back to their strengths grid. And so they were like, oh, yeah, Linda, she's in like communications. I mean, I know she has nothing to do with what we're doing, but Linda, would you help us create a bike share program in San Antonio? Because I just feel like your strengths would lend themselves to some of the work that we're doing. So what it did is it helped to spur creativity, it decreased silos, and it helped to really create that strengths narrative so that it wasn't just in this little area, but it was now this language was being incorporated into everything that they did.
Awesome. Well, I wish we had a lot more time to talk because this is really engaging and I think everyone's into it, but it's been great having you share. Is there a way that we can ask questions with you or connect with you after so we can learn more?
Sure.
Okay, we'll
be
get you
around.
connected. Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
both so much. Thank you guys. Good job.
Can I leave with, I'm going to feel really sorry if I just don't make this one point. You know, I would just like to tell you that if you have an opportunity to know your city well and to get to know the up-and-coming and emerging leaders, please reach out to them and offer your assistance to them, because really this groundswell of public leaders, we need them to know about strengths, and the way for them to do that is for you to go introduce them to it. And the other thing I'd ask you to do is thank a public leader. Thank your city. They do so much for our communities and our nation. So point out a strength in action when you see it happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.